So how important you reckon is the website analytics and user data you reckon that to have a great, strong, sustainable rankings in Google?
Made some big change that we just were like, oh, well, great, thanks for telling me.
Play these kind of a dirty games a lot of times, like when they don't really announce and they just switch the button in the back end and they
Like that. But there's other things like knowledge graph updates or like local updates and stuff that they don't announce or talk about at all. And I'm like, what happened here? And it's like,
can you actually walk us through a typical day in your role as product advisor and a technical SEO at HREF? How do you go about it?
terms that the search just completely shifted.
Yep.
But like there was no announcement, and I haven't really seen the communities talk about this either. But it's like massive dives, and we're like, what happened? Like,
Everyone, it's Rohin from the Agency Growth Lab, and today we have Patrick Stox with us, who is a product advisor and a technical SEO at HREF. And we are ready to dive into some SEO inside secret talk with him. So it's probably gonna be a lot of fun, a lot of things we're gonna reveal out of this podcast. So yeah, welcome to the show, Patrick. It's great to have you here, mate. How are you doing today?
hey everyone, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, now just before the call, I was talking to Patrick. I was trying to know like what's his role up at the HREF, but yeah, he tried to explain the things for how long he's been working and how do he go about the different responsibilities he has got assigned from the HREF side. So yeah, but to Patrick, from your mouth. So let's get it started. So can you actually walk us through a typical day in your role as product advisor and a technical SEO at HREF? How do you go about it?
I don't know that there's a typical day. Like already today, I've been troubleshooting some JavaScript issues. There's also some crawling issues going on right now. That hopefully we're just gonna block some stuff and take care of that. Yesterday I was scoping out some features for GSC, like we pull in the GSC data into Rank Tracker. I don't know, I'm doing a podcast today. I actually have another podcast later today. Yeah, product ideation, writing for the blog, speaking at conferences, actually handling the tech SEO here. A lot of our programmatic projects are handled by me mostly because they're like JavaScript and um, because like some automation and stuff. Lots of different things. I don't think I really have a typical day.
Oh, yeah, no, I can imagine lot of stuff come into play, and especially during the time when Google actually try to roll some kind of an update. I guess you guys gonna be very much busy in the group chats or something. The, hey, what's going on? Where in which direction the things are going? Because I guess like sitting in the back end playing with so much data, especially you. I mean, like you guys be having a lot of collaboration together. Like, hey, what is actually happening? What the Google is trying to slam it down? Because especially this March update. Where like a Google, they just de-index a lot of sites, a lot of rankings actually got dropped. So yeah, it was a crazy time at that one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for Ahrefs, like we don't pay too much attention to it. Like, occasionally, like we'll look and say, like, okay, like what happened here? But we actually look at it for a lot of other websites, and not just during the core updates. Like sometimes they're just big updates that show in our data that we're like, they didn't announce anything. Like there was something on what was it, like May 9th this year, where a lot of the like rating review sites like G2 and all those, they just like took massive dives, and we're like, what happened? Like, and yeah, a lot of the like product comparison terms, the search just completely shifted.
Yep.
But like there was no announcement, and I haven't really seen the community talk about this either. But yeah, we see stuff like that in the data all the time.
Yeah, you reckon that Google play these kind of a dirty games a lot of times, like when they don't really announce and they just switch the button in the back end and they just keep on moving those um SERPs stuff.
Yeah, it's usually if there's a major update like that was a fairly significant shift for that sector. So usually they do announce stuff like that, but there's other things like knowledge graph updates or like local updates and stuff that they don't announce or talk about it at all. And I'm like, what happened here? And it's like, sometimes we got to go look like, what is going on? And like, it's mostly we're trying to figure out, is this a problem in our data?
Yep.
And usually it's not, like very rarely.
Nice.
Usually it's like Google made some big change that like we just are like, oh, well, great, thanks for telling us.
Mm. All right, now let's try to get a little more technical because that's what your expertise is. So how important you reckon is the website analytics and user data you reckon that to have a great, strong, sustainable rankings in Google?
I mean, you definitely want sustainable rankings. As far as the analytics, like this is where Ahrefs is a little different than most companies. I was at IBM before Ahrefs, and like I was part of a team that like built this multi-touch attribution system. Like we tracked everything. It was connected with our sales system, events. Like we literally tracked some users across like 10,000 different touch points
Yay.
over a several year period. So like everything had fuzzy attribution because every system I've ever seen, the data is messy and like some of the stuff you stitch together, some of the inputs, not really the best. But like if you can get to that level, it's so easy to prove value and get more buy-in, which we needed when I was there. Ahrefs is already bought in, so like we have analytics, we rarely use it. We don't really make decisions based on it. Like we kind of know what works. We know our users, we know the type of content that we need to create, the videos. We see the leads come in like in a different way. Like we get the like source of that based on like the form they fill out. Like when you sign up, like, oh, where did you come from? Like, oh, so and so recommended me, or like, oh, HRS blog or Samo on YouTube. So there's a lot less analysis that we have to do, and I think mostly because we don't need to prove our value. Like the company is based on SEO, was built on SEO. Um, it's good to know like some things like is this working? Like if we're trying something new or not.
Yep.
But we don't have to spend a lot of time on the analytics and reporting this stuff.
Yep, yep. No, I agree to this. And moreover, it's really very important to understand, I guess, that how the user is actually going to interacting with the things, as you said, web forms, and to track it out, all these kind of things. I guess that Google actually track all this kind of user interaction on the websites as well to take a smart decisions in their way, how they need to go and push up the soaps. No, that's crazy. Because now, let's try to figure out this thing. I mean, like, see, there are a few myths. There, let's try to do some myth busters in that way. CTRs, what do you think about it? Because a lot of people I've seen the SEO agencies, they get crazy. They say, okay, let's try to do a lot of CTR manipulation kind of thing, and it is really going to make a difference in the rankings. What do you think about it? Fact or
uh
myth?
So I've run tests on this. I know a lot of people who have run tests on this. I don't think anyone that's ever tried to, I did this what, 2013, 2014 using like the Tor network. Like I was trying to anonymize. I have a friend that used like residential proxies to try and, manipulate this. It worked for certain things, which I don't necessarily want to say what that is. But for the most part, for ranking, like it did not work. And I think it's because like if you saw the Google leak, if you read any of the court documents and stuff, it's not that they take the data for an individual result usually. It's usually like this aggregated data across like all these websites. So they're not going to look at like all my pages getting like more click-through rate. Like they're going to look at like in general pages that have these features get more click-through, and they're going to adjust things that way at a larger scale. So the individual click manipulation, like again, it's been tried. There are literally services where you can like trade clicks with people or like
Yes.
buy clicks from people. I can't say that I've ever seen one of those work. All it does is kind of like screw with some of the data and like GSC and all.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I agree to this because, but I've seen a lot of agencies. They have they try to run these kind of like a CTR booster kind of a softwares with the residential proxies, and then they try to do a kind of a manipulations and feel like the rankings gonna get improved. Is it the same for GBP as well? With the GBPs, have you seen the CTRs really gonna help or not?
You know, I'm trying to remember. I don't do much with local, but if I recall, I think Google actually confirmed it was a ranking factor there,
Hmm.
the click-through rates. But yeah, we don't really have a good local representative at Google that talks about stuff very often. But I'm fairly sure there was an article like several years ago where they actually did confirm that to be a factor.
Yep. So before I get to the next question, let's you mentioned about the lake. Now, you guys, the backend system of the HREF could be very different than what we guys actually use. So I've been using HREF for the past like 8 years now. I was on the legacy plan as well. Now, the backend system could be different because you guys might be having a lot of data testing points where you try to correlate and you try to see that what is actually happening, how the movements are going, like we mentioned. How much you're gonna correlate that data with the AI leak data? Oh, sorry, this Google leak data. Do you think the Google leak data was kind of a thing, or that was again a myth that no, the Google, some of in the Google that just released something, or do you actually try to correlate them too?
Well, the what was there was mostly like documentation. Like there's not really anything to confirm like, oh, this is a ranking factor and that kind of thing. There were a lot of articles that made
Yes.
it seem like, oh, here's like 2,500 new like Google ranking factors or whatever, and I'm like, no. Like if it doesn't say like what it's used for, it could just as easily be used for testing. It could be used for like just literally any number of things. It could be used crawling, indexing, yeah, running and making sure like the results were valid. So like it doesn't necessarily mean it's something they're using in the ranking system. And I don't want to talk too much about this because we have a competing search engine. So uh it's yep.com, check it out. But it's, yeah, it's one of those things where I think it got blown a little out of proportion. Or a lot of people were just like, yeah, it kind of confirms some of the things that SEOs know. But there were
Mm,
other things in there that was like, there was one thing about like domain, what do they call it? Like a domain authority type thing. And it's
yep.
people were like, oh, it confirms that they use this and like Moz was right. And I love being at Ahrefs to say, like, yeah, they use domain rank. It's not the
Oh,
case. But they had something in there that was like a similar metric, but it said the specific thing it was used for, which I think was something like I'm trying to recall because it's been a while now since I read those. It was something like we use it for like new spam or something,
yep.
and that's
Yep.
it.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
like, well, how are people like getting that this is now a ranking thing out of this? Like, it's not what it says. We got no more data than that, no more information. So it's one of those things. It's like, is it really used for ranking? I personally view that as like probably not, but the metrics like that at the domain level
Mm,
are kind of like what happens if you take page rank at for each and every page and you kind of like expand that concept to a website. Like you kind of get a very similar thing to what like DRDA
yep.
are trying to show you. So it's kind of like this phenomenon that really happens because of the way PageRank works, and it's just meant to give you like a site level type metric. So I don't think it's like a bad thing, but it's not something that they necessarily
No,
use.
that I completely agree. I mean, like you're literally reading my mind. That was the next thing I was having in my on my list, that myth to domain authority. Do you really think it's a ranking factor or not? And but yeah, you explained it really well. So myth three is like a duplicate content. A lot of times we SEOs we really say, hey, in locals it really doesn't matter if you're using the duplicate content on a different location or a city pages as well. Do you think it's a myth as well, or does it really make a difference?
Uh, if there's like some boilerplate text, like I'm not gonna ever worry about it. I don't think Google cares either. Like you should add something unique, something value to the pages. But in general, no, it's not like a penalty like a lot of people think. The only time it could be is like there is a manual action if you just like rip off other people's content, like that's your entire
Yeah.
website. Like
Yeah.
you can actually get a penalty based on that. But in general, yeah, it's overblown. One of those things that I'm like, oh, I gotta rewrite this two paragraph thing on 100 pages. No, just leave it. Go add something else. Like do something better with your time.
True. No, that's true. That's very true. So how do you see like AI and machine learning actually impacting the future SEO these days? Do you think there is any specific area, or it is really going to make a biggest impact for us?
So I've been working with machine learning for probably a decade or so now. I think I had the first automated redirect script. It was using document level vectors in 2016. I actually like talked about it at a conference back in 2017.
Yes.
So I was a
Okay.
real early adopter of this stuff. It's useful for some things, like again, like automating processes, certain clustering keywords, um, even yeah, like even just bulk tasks. You're missing 800 meta descriptions. Well, no one wants to go write 800 meta descriptions, right? So like use AI for something like that. It'll probably spit out something that's like relatively good. I personally use it for like brainstorming title tags and stuff for my blogs. Summarization it's great for.
Organization.
Uh, right now, like LLMs, they're good for certain things, but not necessarily others. But this has been the case for years. Like there were some early things where I built and I was like, no, this is just like a terrible result. Like it seemed like a good idea. But then it ended up being like the technology wasn't there or it was too slow. That redirect mapper at the time I built that took me almost 3 days to run like a million comparisons.
Yeah.
And now it's like I have a more modern one I built in like 2021 at like 7 minutes to do the same.
True. Yeah.
Um
In fact,
so like the technology improves, the compute power improves, things
well,
get faster, easier. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I think you will see that um, tools will be able to do. SEOs in a lot of cases are already doing this. We have a content tool coming that is actually how can I how can I
is
say
it
that publicly? Because I don't want to tell people too much. You won't be able to like stuff keywords in it. It's actually like measuring topicality.
okay?
So is this relevant? Like, are you including like the things that you need? Are you talking about them? But like just stuffing a bunch of keywords in there, like a lot of the other content tools, that's not gonna work.
Okay.
A fun fact, actually, we HREFs, we have the 34th fastest supercomputer in the world. It's a cluster of NVIDIA H100s that are specifically meant for it's the GPU servers, and they're specifically meant for machine learning. Like we have some pretty big plans.
I can imagine that because there is a numerous amount of data the servers are really processing day in, day out. So I can imagine like how big the servers and the infrastructure they've got at the moment. Because the servers, the crawlers, they've been crawling all the time, like day in, day out. At the same time, the rankings are going on. So everything is going on simultaneously. How big the infrastructure they've got? Have you seen it physically, like and going over there? Because you said like you have been to Singapore as well. So,
I've been in the Singapore data center, not our other ones.
oh yeah,
We
they have
have multiple.
segregated data centers as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Is that
Um,
huge?
yeah, I mean, obviously, like we're a small part on these big data centers, but yeah, it's pretty impressive hardware. If you look on our I think it's the big data page, ahrefs.com/big dash data. We actually list all of our
Data center.
specs there, and it's pretty incredible.
Oh,
I'm actually gonna look real quick. It's 3,300 servers, 746,000 CPU cores, 5 petabytes of RAM. 33 petabytes for hard drives, and then 516 petabytes of the solid state hard drives.
Did you say 3,300 servers? Is
Yeah,
oh did I listen it wrong? Man,
3,300.
that's quite a lot actually. That's a lot of data, and I can really imagine. I mean, like it's a pretty seasoned company in that way as well. So.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has like the scale of data that we have, honestly.
So, a little more insight with the HREF thing. I mean, like since you've been working with for the past 5 years with the HREF, so a little inside secret. So, what do you think is a more surprising thing you have discovered working at HREF in regards to ranking, moving the rankings up in the SOAP, so that kind of things? What, as per the priority, what do you think is actually working these days in SOAPs?
That I've discovered working at Ahrefs.
Because what we can say, we as SEOs, we try to test the things and then we try to do it, but you guys sitting in the back end, you guys are actually playing with the real data. You can see everything. You can see like, okay, what is going on. So it could be very surprising for you guys to figure out, hey, is that this thing can actually make a difference as well? Oh, I was not aware about that.
Yeah, I don't, for the most part, it really is just being more interesting. Like if you own your content, just and this isn't necessarily from the data. I don't
Okay.
know that the data tells us anything we don't already know. Like put in work, put in effort, be interesting. My biggest like learning, I think, as an SEO since being at Ahrefs is the way that the product is incorporated in the content is absolutely brilliant. I
Yep.
wish I had done this before at other companies. Um, it basically takes people from this high level content right down into the mid level. Like
Yep.
you instead of just the information, like you become solution aware. Like it's not
Yes.
just what is this thing? What do I need to know about this content? Really takes you right down into like, okay, now I know what it is, and like HRS can help me do the thing. Like it's great. It absolutely moves people down the funnel, and that's why it works so well.
And do you think is there any unutilized HREF feature which most of the SEO professionals don't take really advantage of?
We have I think a lot of folks use a fraction of the tool.
Oh, yeah.
Web Explorer is incredibly powerful. That's actually like a combination Ahrefs and Yep Tech.
Mm,
So if you ever used like Scrapebox back in the day and like searched footprints and that kind of thing, we basically just have this ready to go database that you can kind of filter and sort like any way that you want. So if you want to, like, we have some examples on the page. Like, you want to see every espresso affiliate on Amazon, every page that links to Amazon with an affiliate code that talks about espresso. Boom, it's there in a matter of seconds,
all
which
right.
is pretty incredible and pretty powerful.
And where is that? I mean, like if you go to the HREF, where exactly we can see that feature? Because
It
for
should be in the top menu.
Site Explorer, Content Explorer, Keyword Explorer, and that's it. We SEOs usually end up over there only. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Web Explorer is just to the right of Content Explorer in the menu. I don't know. There's so many really good features. Portfolios is
Yep.
probably one of the most versatile.
Yep.
Slicing and dicing pages, or even adding like competitors, multiple domains, or for enterprise companies, if you have multiple brands, multiple sites, like you can kind of treat these as like one, and then
Yep.
start a lot of the research from there in Site Explorer. Or if I had competitors, I can go in and be like, okay, what new pages have they created? What did
Mm.
they delete? Uh, Top winners, top losers, like all this stuff is
And now we
really
have
interesting.
actually use this as such, I guess. Yeah, no, and what let's talk about a little more about it. Like, what do you think are most common technical SEO mistakes you have seen the experienced professionals are making even as well these days?
The ones that have an impact,
Yep.
failing redirects after a migration, like
Okay,
no
okay.
one ever seems to get that right.
That's one thing, yeah.
Um, yeah, no indexing stuff or accidentally no indexing things. JavaScript sites in general have tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of issues. Not that they have to, it's just yeah, the devs are still they're not used to working with SEO. Like with PHP, HTML, like the devs have been working kind of with SEOs for a decade, 2 decades. JavaScript devs are just like starting to work with SEOs in the last few years, I would say. So a lot of the things that just work out of the box now, like you install WordPress, like you probably don't have real like technical SEO issues unless you forget to check the box that like no indexes the whole site.
Yep.
You probably don't have too many real issues. Whereas a lot of these others are so custom, and like the frameworks and stuff don't necessarily have all this stuff out of the box yet. So you end up with the same issues over and over and over again on like different frameworks, because of course that's how it is. Like they want to build on different things, whatever's new, shiny. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really like there's so many issues. The
So
web is getting just like more complex too. Like I'm seeing more and more like really almost one-off things. Like I saw something in in was it in Robots Text like a few weeks back that I was like, what even is this thing? And it was it's called a zero width space.
yep. All
And
right.
to even test this, I had to figure out like how can I even add this to a file? Because I'm like, I don't even know what the thing is. And like, here it is. And I'm like, it seemed to be causing a problem for us crawling. Or it basically like ignored the line.
Yep.
So it was like, I think it was right before a disallow, and like we were crawling the thing anyway. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. Like, I think like we're ignoring that. And so I had to recreate it, just figure out like how Google was treating this.
Yep.
And I'm like, what? Like, that's the only time in my entire career I've seen anything like that. So there's a lot of like weird like one-off things that we get at Ahrefs.
Yeah.
But in general, like server, like all the different infrastructure, where things even happen, because now you've got CDNs, you've got servers, potentially like multiple servers, different CMS systems. Like it gets complicated on some websites. I'm like, y'all should just install WordPress, you
I can
know?
like test security and these kind of things gonna be enormous as well. What do you think? Just a very final few questions is that Patrick? I mean, like, what do you think? The EMDs, do you reckon still work? Because this is kind of a misconception. I guess I see a lot in the HREF, in not in the HREF, sorry, in the Facebook groups, that the people they say, hey, the EMDs are working, still working for them. The others they do scream, we used it, but they didn't work. What's your take on that?
I mean, officially it doesn't, and I think there was even something in the leaked documents where like they basically like demote it. But at a certain point, maybe it does work still. Because like if you think about it, if a lot of your anchor text is this exact thing, or um that's like what people are searching, and it looks like that is your company. Like we had this in the local market actually with an SEO company. Like they called themselves like Raleigh, I don't want to call anyone else out specifically, but they called themselves the thing that people were searching.
Yep.
And they ranked, and they did it for years and years and years. And like it wasn't that, their content was better, their website was better, their links were better. They were going up against players that had been in the market for like 15, 20 years, and yet the one that ranked was them. And instead of the local pack, actually, there was a knowledge graph for
Yeah.
them. So Google associated that term as their company rather than like I want a list of companies. And it was even some of their like social media profiles and stuff that were ranking, and other pages, instead of the page that you would expect that's like a choice, a list of companies. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to say like it
It doesn't.
doesn't necessarily work. I don't know that that has as much to do with the domain as it does their branding, though. So it's probably their branding that caused it, not necessarily the domain itself.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so because it's a complete ecosystem in itself. So maybe something else is working where it's not. Just as a curiosity, I mean, like with the content side. So let's take a hypothetical scenario, like someone has just published a content and all of the content is not really performing. So as a Patrick style, what would be the best thing they can do about it? Should they go about prune the content, change the content, or what do you think about it? Because recently you just mentioned like HREF is coming up with a different kind of a feature. So maybe you guys have done a kind of a thing into it. And really the way why I'm asking you this question is because we have seen the big stuff has actually happened in this March update where well-established sites, they even got tanked as well. So my question is, how do they can go and recover from that penalty, which was more to do with the content, I guess.
I mean, if you got hit by an update, you're probably gonna have to wait till the next update to see any improvement
I'll tell you
or
personally,
to see much
I'll
improvement.
tell you
But
personally,
like,
I haven't seen one single site which has recovered really well after this March update. I could be wrong too, but I'm just telling you what I've noticed. So, but
well,
maybe you guys are more experienced than me in every way.
uh, well, I guess there's another update coming. I think like Google mentioned something in the next few weeks, so maybe then. But is even with what you have, like you can do some testing to kind of make your content better. Like if I launch something and I'll give you an example. I launched a page, I think it was on like SEO tools or enterprise SEO tools or something. If anyone ever looks through our page inspect, you're probably going to see like 50 different tests that I've run trying to get that page to
Now,
rank.
see,
Like I was like adding like small things like, well, what if I add like the search volume for each of these tools? Or like what if I do a comparison chart? Or um what if I just completely remove the other tools, which is I think how it is now and it's ranking better than it has. But I probably ran 50 tests on that page and then just like requested indexing and see how like Google does it basically. So it's almost for a while it was multiple times a day or or a week that I was going in there and like making all these little tests and adjustments. Say like, what if I add this competitor? What if I remove someone? Like, um, and yeah, it's you can do that kind of thing. Like, what if I add this paragraph? What if I add this section about this? What if I link over here, link to add a related resources section? I think SEOs in general, like they view content as kind of one and done. Like you publish it and maybe 2 years later you go and update it or something. But like you
that's
can really see the impact of these small changes within a matter depends on how much your site is crawled. Like we're crawled quite a bit. So it's very easy for me to like go request indexing multiple times a day and like Google will actually go do that.
yep.
And when that happens, like the ranking adjustment based on the content is pretty much instant. You probably have an answer by the next day at the worst of how this impacted if it did anything.
Yeah, but now we can see it with this latest HREF feature where we can actually go and check it out for any of the competitor site or even site. We can literally see that how they are actually making content changes and we can correlate that thing along with the ranking graph as well, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I love that feature so much. It's
That
awesome.
that's
I have big plans for that too.
is all right. So if there is one thing, and that probably gonna be the last question I have to ask, Pat. If there is one single thing, if you have to go about changing the Google algorithm, what that gonna be, you reckon?
What would I change?
Which you think it is
SEOs
just
are gonna hate me, but I really like I don't think the way that we do the like Tim Blue links, I think is the pass. Like we're gonna see more like I told our team this, like my dream, I've mentioned this in conference presentations for like a decade. My dream result as a user is give me a Cliff Notes version. Basically, give me a summary of a topic for informational queries. Like, link me to some additional resources. I can read some more, but like, I don't want like if I go read an informational article now, or anytime in the past like decade, it's all the SEO content. Like I read the first 5 articles and I feel like I read the same blog 5 times.
Yep.
Like that's not that useful to me. Like give me like at that point it's general information. Just give me that, link me to some resources, give me the interesting tidbits that are pulled out from each one or tips. But yeah, it's search itself, I think is going to change a lot in the next few
Yeah.
years.
It's something I'm really curious to know from you. Like in most of the Facebook groups these days, I'm not going to take any name, but typically everyone's just talking about the semantics and semantic SEO and that kind of things. You probably know who I'm talking about. But yeah, what do you think? Is there really the factual stuff behind that? Because there is what they claim that the Google patents, they try to read it, or you still think that the basics are still the same? The SEO basics are still the same what it was back in the 2012 or 13 when we all used to rank websites like crazy, and then or going through all those, adding the semantic and the topical graphs and all the big terms into the things can actually is the only way to rank these days. What do you think about it?
I mean, it's not that different than what SEOs are doing. Like semantics is just like language understanding, and things
Yes.
have gotten better with it. I actually used I think my first big conference presentation back in like 2016 was using like natural language processing to like group terms and then create like clusters for the content. Like but the concept of like clustering keywords using that for pages a decade plus before like what I was doing. I was just trying to bring it a little more modern
Yes.
at the time. But yeah, semantics are just like understanding. It's really like Google wants for you to not have to like worry about I got to use this specific keyword. Like if there's some variation of that, if there's a word that means the same thing, it's basically them trying to understand that. They had a system, they might still use this, but basically query expansion. So when you put in something, it would go look for all the different variations. Now, in a modern system, they might actually just use the vector space to
Yes.
say like this is very similar in meaning because like the distance from where it is very close, and like the direction from what you actually searched can actually like impart some meaning to that too.
Mm.
um I don't know how this really helps SEOs other than like write more naturally. The clustering, yeah, like topicality, that's a thing. Like we know they've used that for many years. But again, not really like a new concept or anything. It's yeah, talk about topics, related topics. Um, they've been giving us examples of this stuff since like 2001. They're like, yeah, if you like I forget the exact example back then, but it was like if you talk about this, like we want to see like these other related things. Like, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And the point of it is like they're trying to judge kind of natural content.
Yeah.
Um that whole like query expansion thing was basically like they don't want to just say like because you use this specific version of this keyword, we counted that 9 times. Well, what if I use like uh, a version with an S, like a plural version? Back in the day, that was like two completely different things basically, and at some point they combined those, but now like they can kind of look at it more holistically and just figure it out so that you don't have to use those variations, you don't have to do these other tricks and stuff.
Exactly right. Because see, for me, best plumbers Chicago, best plumbers in Chicago, Chicago's best plumbers, they are very much the same thing because Google algorithm is smart enough to judge the difference between the keyword to keyword. You know what I mean? So and we need to think of the I guess some of the fancy words which might be people are putting in this semantics, micro semantics, they were always there, but we need to think of, and I guess the Google thinks in the same way as well from the layman level. Let's say there is a business person who wants to write it out something to educate the people about their service. It could be the plumber, drain cleaning services or something. They don't really understand all the semantics and the vectors and all that kind of things. So for them, it is more putting out the information. But I could be wrong. But because I see all this kind of talks very often in the Facebook groups in the last 2 years, so I just thought to actually take your thought on that one. That what do you think about it? Like, is that really be that we need to stress too much about creating these topical clusters, and then everything has to be inside the topical clusters, nothing has to go outside that, and then every single article
But now that sounds like the old
semantically,
siloing, like nothing
yeah, the
outside. That doesn't really
silo.
make sense.
Yeah. No, see, yeah,
uh,
that's true. That's a silo kind of a stuff. They try to say it, and that reminds me of that. The very first silo thing I read back in 2013, I remember there was Bruce Clay. There was a single article he was having those jar model where the marbles should be segregated in that way. So yeah, there's always an easy way to explain the things, and then there is a hardest way to explain the things as well. But I think as a layman with a non-coding language, maybe the semantics, micro semantics, and all these things are a little more complicated stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, the even like Bruce Clay, I think coined silo, but before that, I want to say it was what inverted pyramid. Like the names just changed. Now
Yeah.
we have
Same.
clustering, but for a while it was just keyword groups and yeah,
Yes.
names change over
Fine
time, but
tuning.
a lot of the concepts are the same. Going back real quick on the semantic thing though, like you made an interesting point, all the variations of the page for Chicago plumbers, plumbers in Chicago. Like I think a lot of like Google's understanding was almost forced because SEOs were doing the wrong thing. Like it was the right thing for clients, sort of. In the like we would at one point create a page for every single variation of
Yes.
every single one of these keywords. And that was looking back, that was ridiculous. But like Google kind of had to adapt to that. We were basically spamming their index and it was working. Now like one page is probably going to perform better than having 15 versions of that plumbers
Yes.
in Chicago
True.
page. So the incentives kind of change now to do the one page and do it well rather than, 15 versions in their index for just plumbers in Chicago.
Exactly. And there's one question, I don't know, it just came to my mind, is the e-commerce thing. A lot of people they say like, hey, the e-commerce thing, it's on the collection pages. Let's say if it's a Shopify or something platform we are using, putting out the content at the top that gives a more better jump in the rankings rather than putting the content underneath that. Or without the content is it's probably be a little hard one for the Google to understand the context of the page. Do you really think about it? Have you guys really done any kind of testing on that too? That putting out the paragraph of the content at the top because Google, and am I right to ask like that Google bot, they try to read the content from top to bottom because some people they say the latest technology is they try to read it from the down to up, the left to right, and right to left, the bird thing. So they take in conception. So what do you think that collection page putting out the content at the top, is that a myth or does that really make a difference?
I think it depends on how that's done. Like if it's useful content, if it helps people guide people like to the right product and that kind
Yep.
of thing, probably
Okay.
useful. Definitely more useful at the top than the bottom. Like at the bottom, you're just trying to hide and like stuff keywords mostly. At the top, like that can actually be useful for users if done well. Now, if you're again like here's a whole like FAQ and 15 dozen paragraphs, not so useful. And I think John Mueller's even talked where you are basically like confusing them on the intent at that point. Like, is this an informational page or an e-commerce page? So it's one of those things where I think you have to be a little careful about it. But I think that content, like not just for Google, but can actually be useful for Google for users. You know, how to what material is best for this, or like
Yep.
what size thing do I need for a different thing? Like that kind of stuff can actually be helpful, I
Yep.
think.
And what
But people have tested this and they've seen mixed results because they
yeah,
do all kinds of different things.
yeah. No, it depends on the keyword to keyword, niche to niche, and the type of content, like you said as well. And how about that? Because you're a technical guy, and really, I want to know because maybe I won't get a next chance to ask that. That hiding the content. BSCOs try to do a lot, like put out the content, hide it in the backend so that it doesn't really affect the UI UX of the page. Do you think like Google bot is smart enough to understand and make a difference that this content is just for the search engines only and not for the real people? You know what I mean?
I mean, the way that they store everything when they render a page, like they would know.
Okay.
Like you put the CSS so like the content's technically off the page somewhere. That's recorded. Like
Yeah.
they have the document object model, which a lot of people are familiar with, but they also have the CSS object model. So like they know the size of your text. They know the if this is a heading tag, like all this stuff is literally recorded.
That's
So
super.
I don't think you're gonna fool them on stuff like that, to be honest.
That's exactly I was trying to, because it's just the information we can get in a more better way from the guys like you who is actually very much technical into the JavaScript and CSS kind of things as well. That's super good. So I think we had a really great session. So if there is a one piece of advice you need to give to someone who is just starting out in the SEO career, why I'm asking, because there is a lot of noise going on into the SEO world at the moment. So what that advice would be?
Just find your preferred learning method, if it's like reading or like videos and or podcasts. And just absorb information. Like you won't get everything to start with, but like having that base, if you go like read Google's documentation, go back 2 years later, you read it, suddenly you're gonna understand a lot more because you'll have more experience. You know, the Ahrefs blog is great. Also, Aleda has learningseo.io. I my preferred method is reading. Like I read like way more blogs than people probably would think. I know a lot of SEOs like get to a point in their career and they just like stop reading this stuff, but like everywhere to me, one new idea, one piece of inspiration can spark like multiple more ideas or things that I want to test, try out. So having that curiosity and just going and absorbing the knowledge, I think is probably the most useful thing people can do.
Yeah, no, that's true, because I think that is the only thing which can really make a difference what we are, a good SEO or a bad one, because every second person, sometimes after watching a couple of videos on YouTube, they feel themselves as a SEO guru, but it is very important to keep updating yourself, because SEO, I guess these days is very dynamic. It is actually keep on very evolving, keep on changing as well. So yeah, now I think it's the best advice what you have mentioned, to keep on reading, to keep
Well,
updating. Yeah.
I'm gonna like disagree with you a little bit. Like things don't change overall. Create good content, get links. It's also don't overcomplicate things. Like, yes, there are some complicated topics, but like if you go down these rabbit holes, like I think there's that. I don't know if you know the meme, but there's a meme where there's a curve here. I'm gonna do it so for the camera, right? So it's right, and it basically like when you're starting out, it's like content links, blah blah blah, and then here it's like, oh, let's go into semantic and all this conspiracy theories
Uh,
and all
I
this
know.
complication, and then like when you get later in your career, you're like, okay, back to the basics, keep things simple. That other stuff matters like 1% of the time. Like if you just put in the work, if you do the right things, like you're gonna be successful.
Yes, no, that's and it comes down to a lot of testing as well. That we keep on testing. I mean, like, see, you're a pretty good example. Like you said, like for that page SEO or SEO tools or something on a HREF blog, you changed like 50 different things to make sure that what is actually working, what is really going to make a difference, and eventually it worked for you. That you got a pretty good ranking for that particular keyword. So I think that is something is really very important, that we keep on learning, don't really complicate too much for the things, and then keep on testing as well for that stuff. So that's super.
Yeah,
So
you can make improvements like a little bit at a time. You don't have to go completely rewrite a blog post or a page. Like just you have an idea, go try it. You'll know maybe come back next week, see how it did. Like you can run this on tons of pages at once. On the programmatic stuff, like we're like add this, add something over here, change this. Like let's do something here. So that's more like at scale because we do it once and it happens on like 10,000 pages. But
yes,
like for a blog, there's no reason you can't do the same thing. Just go try.
exactly right. No, that's super well. And anyone who really wants to know more about you or want to read your stuff, what is the best place for that? Is it a HREF blog, or you got some your own blog, or a podcast, or a YouTube channel, something as well?
Yeah, mostly the Ahrefs blog, but fairly active on like Twitter, LinkedIn.
Okay.
It's always Patrick Stox. I'm the only one with that name, so pretty
All
easy to
right.
find.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely put that link, your couple of resource links in the YouTube description of this video as well. Thanks for that,
Awesome.
Patrick. I really appreciate the time you have given me, and trust me, there's a lot of good stuff. I really learned it today as well. I think I'm definitely going to implement few of those things into my own testings as well. And yeah, it's just happy as you. We just need to keep on working to make a difference.
Yeah. Thanks for
Thanks for
having
being
me,
on the show.
Ryan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Thank you.